seat-by-seat polling for the Voice to Parliament. It shows the yes vote ahead in just 22 of the 151 federal seats. Joining me now is Jesuit priest, law professor and scholar, Father Frank Brennan. Father Frank, thank you for your time. Looking at that polling,
pleasure.
The yes vote heading for a heavy defeat on Saturday. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, Kieran, I think it's been going wrong for a while. And I think if we go back to Garma in July 2022, I think if the Prime Minister had made some deliberate efforts at bipartisanship at that stage, things could have gone better. Then looking forward, if he'd moved to have a parliamentary process, to have everyone at the table, and if he'd done that before April 4 this year, I think that could have been better. I think the really big one, though, is if there'd been some design of the voice out there. I was on the Garma Langton committee. We met for 2 years. There were 52 people involved in that, mostly Indigenous. And as Marcia Langton said in 2021, most of us were of the view that it should be legislated first. And everyone will recall that Noel Pearson gave a very solemn address at the National Museum in March 2021, saying that we should follow what was done with same-sex marriage and have some sort of exposure draft bill put out there so the voters would know what we're voting on. So I think all of those things have led to a problematic situation in which we are now, where really what we're asking of voters is that they trust that all will be well. And we have heard from people like retired Chief Justice French, who came to the National Press Club, came across from Perth in order to assure people that all would be well. So I think to be attentive to those sorts of voices and to simply hope that we can get there is still something which is worthy of doing. Nothing's perfect, and you try and work with the best you've got.
Yep, and I know you are going to vote despite your concerns. You're going to vote yes. We'll get to those, why yes. Your view has got to that in a moment. I just want to drill into a bit more of this other discussion about where the stumbles happen. Do you think the advisors to the Yes campaign also said, keep the detail to a minimum, keep it like, say, like the same-sex marriage vote, where it didn't go to a convention, there wasn't all of the normal detail around a referendum, like we saw with the Republic, for example? If we keep it less detailed, more low-key, we might get it through. Is that? Yes. Do you think that was the advice?
I think there was something of that. I think there were three different strands during 2021, if I might say. There was what you might call the Megan Davis strand of advice, which was, look, you don't want to set up a voice first because if it works, government won't like it and won't want it constitutionalised. If it doesn't work, they won't do it. So therefore, don't do anything to prick the balloon and maintain the pressure for it to get up. I think that was one point of view, and I think it's probably the point of view that won out. Second, there was Noel Pearson's point of view, which was to say, look, not keen on legislating it first, but definitely we've got to learn the lesson from same-sex marriage, and we've got to have something like an exposure draft bill out there so that people actually know what we're talking about. And then there were the vast overwhelming number of us in the Garma Langton process who thought that it should be first legislated. So I think what we had was a new government where, with a flush of enthusiasm, I think they were told, look, if you look at the polling that occurred with same-sex marriage, you might be able to get there on a wing and a prayer, and you might be able to do it without giving the detail. And yes, there's a perfectly valid argument to say that you don't put detail into the Constitution, but I think they then made the logical mistake of saying, well, if you don't put the detail in the Constitution, there's no need to give the people the detail before they vote on the provision in the Constitution. But clearly, I think what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of people of very goodwill are saying, well, if we had some more detail, we might be able to get to yes more easily.
One of the other problems that you've pointed to was the hand-picked group, nothing against the 21 Indigenous leaders that were chosen, but it did create a sense of division within the Aboriginal community itself.
It did, because, I mean, if you look post-Garma in July 2022, if government had decided, as they had, not to pursue a bipartisan structured process at that stage, and if they decided not to release details of what the voice would look like, then to hand-pick a group of 21, as I've always said, that was a perfectly valid part of the process, but to make it the whole process up until April this year, Kieran, I think was a big mistake, because obviously if you choose 21 people to advise, then those who aren't chosen, who aren't the 21, if they have a different view, then of course they'll be out there protesting about the matter. And I think it's self-evident to everyone, if you step away from Aboriginal issues to something else, for example, there's often been talk about constitutionalising local government. Well, imagine if a coalition government said, we will hand-pick 21 local councillors and we'll deal with them and tell everyone else what the answer is. There'd be hell to play. And I think that's part of what is also playing out here.
How much of a missed opportunity was that olive branch from Julie and Lisa into trying to get more Conservatives on board? And I also think to the proposal you had to remove executive government from the reference within the referendum as well. They seem like opportunities to extend the hand of friendship and an olive branch to bring more people along. Were they damaging episodes?
They were. I mean, if only there had been a grasping at the olive branch, I suppose we'd say we'd be in a better position than we are now. I think the real clincher, at least for me, was the conduct of the parliamentary committee back in April and May. Now, some of the Liberals who were key to get on board were not only Julie and Lisa, but also Andrew Bragg. Now, Andrew Bragg served on that parliamentary committee, and he basically labelled it a joke and said that it was intellectually dishonest. And I have to say, having appeared before that committee, it was a joke. And I think that was a great tragedy, because even at that late stage, I thought it would have been very good to have government reaching out to get more key Liberals on board, so that there might be the prospect not only of Julie and Lisa, but others as well getting about and being able to spread the word. Because what we've got at the moment is something which is just so party political, so partisan, and we know from history that you can't amend the Australian Constitution readily if you do not have the major political parties in train.
And do you think that those campaigning this time thought that they could defy history, that things had changed with social media, with a younger generation coming through? Was that the sentiment?
That was definitely the sentiment, and there was also the sentiment that same-sex marriage, the plebiscite there, carried lessons. But as I say, they did put to one side the lesson of same-sex marriage, namely prepare an exposure draft bill and put it to one side, but at least everyone knows what the issues are and what the problems are. They didn't do that. But what they did do was they said, well, same-sex marriage got up by 60%, so we think we could do the same here. But I think what was overlooked there, if I may say, Kieran, was that the plebiscite, of course, was voluntary. 20% of people didn't vote. Well, the 20% of people who didn't vote, when they're forced to vote in a referendum, no matter what the issue is, I think they're more likely to vote no rather than yes. But I think the other thing that backfired very badly was that, of course, with same-sex marriage, you didn't have leading gays and lesbians out there saying vote no. Whereas what we've had in this campaign has been an eloquent set of Aboriginal leaders, both for yes and for no. And that's the first time we've seen that. And so where you've got a division of opinion amongst the very people who are to be advantaged by a constitutional change of this sort, then I think it becomes very problematic indeed. There's another deeper philosophical question at play, if I may say, Kieran, and it's this. Same-sex marriage has some similarities with the 1967 referendum and also with the one only successful Labor referendum in 1946. They were all about saying, let's treat everyone the same. in 1967, it was give Aboriginal people the same rights as all of us. With same-sex marriage, it was treat everyone the same, no matter what their sexual orientation. This is quite a different thing philosophically, and I don't think we've done enough work in terms of the community generally to have the real discussion about substantive community rights for first Australians. I think Noel Pearson has tried to open it up belatedly in drawing a distinction between Indigenous First Peoples and race, but I think that needed to be a far deeper conversation which would have taken much more time in the Australian community generally.
Father Frank, I'm sorry, we've only got 30 seconds left, but just quickly, you will vote yes. You're arguing for a yes, despite your concerns that it will slow down the business of government.
Absolutely.
Just quickly on that, if you can.
Quickly on that, it's to say, look, nothing's perfect. This is what we've got to work with. We've been trying to deal with this since 2007. We're trying to find that sweet spot between the Liberal Party, the Labor Party and the Aboriginal leadership. There's no guarantee we'll have better leadership than we've got with Albanese, Dutton, Pearson, Davis, etc., than we've got at the moment. So I think we've got to cling to what we can get now and make sure that it works, and have a government that has a commitment to making it work, because they're the ones who steered it through, having jumped some of the processes.
Father Frank, thanks for talking to us right throughout the campaign. I look forward to talking to you about what's next after the weekend. Thanks so much, as always.